Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome to our webinar today, A Future of Learning, Empowering Teachers in a Fast-Changing World. My name is Barbara Lotierzo. I'm the UK Government Head of Education for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I will be your host today. I'm really pleased to be here with you, marking the start of the UK LATAC Partners in Education Month. Throughout this month, we will share some information on the UK expertise and knowledge in education, some success cases and interesting stories on how the UK is partnering with organizations and countries all over the world. You can find this information through our channels, our social media, and also our page that will be available to you in our Q&A session and also during the comments bit. Before we start the session, I would like to invite my colleague, Richard Leach, who is the lead for Asia Pacific and Americas, to say a couple of welcome words to you. Welcome, Richard, and thank you for joining us today.
Barbara, thank you very much too. And good morning and good afternoon from the UK. My name is Richard Leach. I'm the education lead for the Pacific and the Americas. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss the critical roles teachers play in education and how the fast-paced changes we are seeing now impact how and what we teach. I would like to welcome every one of you and thank you for joining us in this discussion. I hope our specialists' presentations offer important insights on how we navigate through these challenging times. Education is a priority area for the British government, and our team in LATAC is working to strengthen even more the relationship between both our regions through a number of activities, engagements, and actions. Our knowledgeable and helpful local staff, led by Barbara, are committed to strengthening the links with local partners, and our ultimate goal is to ensure a quality education for everyone. The COVID-19 pandemic had an unprecedented impact on education. Institutions all around the world have had to reinvent themselves and think of creative ways to keep activities going, often by rapidly mastering or implementing new technology. But ultimately, it may be that we've accelerated trends, and it may have just forced us to look now for innovative ways to tackle many of our already existing issues. We have seen many transformations in the education sector as the world we live in changes to embrace technology, and how and what we teach in our education system must also be reshaped to keep up to date with the growing demands of the 21st century. The UK has a long tradition in teacher training, and combined with our position as a global EdTech hub, we have many companies with excellent reputations in competitive technological innovation. In a few minutes, we will have the opportunity to listen to UK specialists on their amazing work and illustrated with success cases. We hope these powerful insights and trends can help you to ensure teachers play a key role in building back better after the pandemic. Thank you again for joining us. We welcome your questions and comments through the chat, and we'll discuss them during the Q&A session at the end. So I wish you all have an excellent event.
Thank you, Richard. I'm really excited to our session today. When we were working on the agenda, on the information we wanted to share with you throughout this month, we thought, what better day to start this knowledge sharing period than the World Teachers Day. So, as a matter of information, the World Teachers Day was established back in 1966 when the UNESCO recommendation concerning the status of teachers was adopted. This is a set of guidelines that helps promoting teachers' status in the interest of quality education. And the celebration aims to really raise awareness on the key role of teachers ensuring education and quality all across the world. We know that teachers are pivotal to education all over the world, and that the past year wasn't really easy to anyone, and teachers have been superstars in keeping up with everything going on. So our webinar today really aims to discuss a little bit on the future of learning and discuss a little bit on teacher training, what are the expectations for the 21st century, and share a little bit of the UK experience on that front. And to do that, I will invite Kat Scott to join us, and she will be our very first guest. Hello, Kat. Very happy to have you with us. Kat is the Director of Education and Research at the Chartered College of Teaching. She's a former English teacher, and her role has since focused on supporting teacher development, both online and through face-to-face activities, with a particular focus on development through collaboration and through engagement with research and evidence. She has worked as a teacher and advisor in the state and independent sector, as well as in corporate learning and development. Kat leads on the Chartered College of Teaching's work around the teacher Cpd, including the Chartered Teacher Program. On top of all of that, Kat is also studying for her doctorate at the UCL Institute of Education. Over to you, Kat. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'll just get my my screen sharing. I was actually due to be in Brazil last year, which obviously with everything going on did not happen in the end. And I've optimistically booked to visit Argentina next year. So let's hope that that does happen and that I get a chance to visit that part of the world. It's been somewhere I've always wanted to visit. So I have my fingers very crossed. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit today just about, I think, the two aspects that we need to think about when we think about teacher training and teacher development and how those relate to technology, because I think there are two very distinct things that we need to consider. To give you a bit of context of the organisation that I work for and the examples that I'll be giving, we are a professional membership body for teachers in England, but we also have members all around the world. Any teachers working in any different sectors and settings can join us. And we're a relatively new organisation. We launched just nearly 5 years ago. And we're all about celebrating and supporting and connecting teachers, very much in the way we've just heard about on World Teacher Day, absolutely recognising the expertise of teachers and making sure that teachers are supported and developed, and that teaching and the teaching profession is recognised for the amazing job that our teachers are doing. So I said it's a sort of story of two parts, and the first part that I wanted to think about is around how we can develop teachers' use of technology to make sure that they are able to use technology really effectively to support teaching and learning. Just reflecting on this, as we heard in the introduction, of course, the pandemic has changed drastically how we are delivering teaching and learning, what education has looked like. But the need for teachers to use technology effectively is not something that's unique or new and has arrived just during the pandemic. It's something that's been an area of interest in education for probably 30, 40 years or more in various different ways. Prior to the pandemic, certainly we were seeing schools thinking about how they might use technology in different ways to support pupil learning. Lots of things being done on virtual learning environments, online learning platforms, maybe some schools certainly investing in devices, every pupil having an iPad, every pupil having a Chromebook, and using those within lessons for various different purposes. So there were certainly things like that already happening prior to the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic has changed things. The thing that I think has been a particular focus, of course, is the online delivery of lessons in England, as all around the world. Schools were closed, meaning that suddenly schools needed to deliver their learning online. I know that different approaches have been taken in different places to this. Some countries were able to kind of broadcast.
Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think your presentation is in presentation mode. Would you mind putting it slightly bigger for our audience to see?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, let me just see. It's in, I had it in full screen mode actually, but was that not showing?
No, I don't think so. We can see the full set of slides on the left side.
Okay,
And
let me just
then the
try.
main one.
It doesn't sound like it changed when I press play. Let me try again.
Okay.
Is that better now?
No, it's pretty much the same.
That's very strange. On my screen, that's now full screen. Let me just see if I can change this. Is that any better?
It is without the left side set of slides, but we can see slide layout on the right side of the screen.
Well, this is going well, isn't it?
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's strange. I'm clicking the play button
Yeah.
to the slideshow, but it's just not appearing differently for you, is it?
I don't think so, but I mean, I can see the slide now. I think, yeah, much better.
Slightly. There we go. How about that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hopefully that will work. Sorry that's not absolutely perfect. Always good when the technology works well when I'm talking about technology. Certainly there's been this focus on moving to online delivery in particular. As I said, in some countries there was sort of national learning broadcast in different ways. In England, it was very much schools primarily who were delivering online learning in different ways for their pupils at home, or remote learning, not always online. Because as ever, of course, there were children and families who didn't have access to devices, who didn't have access to reliable broadband to enable them to learn online, which was one of the big challenges. And I think now we also see a real interest in how technology might be used beyond the pandemic. I think it would be fair to say that prior to the pandemic, there were some people who believed very strongly that technology was the future for education and that technology should be a part of what we're doing, that using devices and things would help to enhance learning. But there were also people who would argue that actually technology becomes a distraction, and what we need to be doing is making sure that we don't bring technology in unnecessarily. I think the pandemic has given us a chance to see what technology can do, but it's also raised some of the challenges with technology as well. So it's always a difficult balance. But I think looking forward, we can see where technology can be used really well, but also I think the pandemic has highlighted what is lost if we separate the teacher out too much. So I think we need to make sure that going forwards, we see where does technology help, where does it hinder, and make sure that we can make the most of it. So what has our approach been to technology at the Chartered College of Teaching and developing teachers' knowledge of using technology effectively? First of all, I just wanted to highlight some things that we did before the pandemic. We were actually supported by the Department for Education in England to produce some resources as their education EdTech strategy came out. One of those was a publication that we sent to every school in the country, which included over 20 articles based in research. It's a research journal looking at how technology can and might support education, as well as the challenges that might exist in that. We also produced two MOOCs, two massive open online courses through the platform FutureLearn that were all around the use of technology. These were completely free and available online. They continue to be available online. We took particular focus in those. One of them looked at the leadership of education technology in schools, because one thing that we know, of course, is that we need to be purposeful about how technology is used. Our school leaders need to have a vision and be supporting how technology is used to make sure that it's used well and safely and effectively. Alongside that, we have a course that's targeted at teachers that looks at how technology can be used in evidence-based teaching and learning. This is something that is really important for us, that actually we need to move away from the risk of just using technology because it seems exciting or innovative or there are shiny devices. We need instead to make sure that we're thinking about what does research tell us about effective teaching and learning, and how might technology support us in that. So that's really where that course takes a focus. It starts with teaching and learning, it starts with pedagogy, and then it looks at how technology might support that. Since the pandemic, we have then developed some other resources to support people, particularly with the online learning. So We have created resource banks and reading lists that bring together the best examples of high quality online learning. We've produced very short guides that look at things like how we can provide effective feedback in an online environment, how we can assess effectively online. These intentionally are only 1 page long, each of them, because one of the challenges, of course, that teachers faced during the pandemic was a lack of time to do everything that was expected. And finally, we've also carried out a number of research studies with teachers, including reviewing what we know from around the world and asking teachers their own views on what makes effective distance learning. And we've published those as reports to support teachers. I wanted to share also a couple of other examples from England of things that have been done during the pandemic to support schools in making the best use of technology. One of those is a program called the EdTech Demonstrators Program. This was a government-funded program, still is, a program where a number of schools all around the country who were identified as being very effective in their use of education technology act as support providers, as trainers for other schools in their region. So they are demonstrating effective use of technology and supporting others with that. This seems to have been a very effective approach because it, rather than being sort of single and centralized, it allowed schools in different regions to support other schools who might face similar challenges. We've also seen, as you might expect, lots of development from EdTech companies who were seeking to show how their products might work well in an online learning environment, how their products could support teaching and learning effectively during lockdown and during a pandemic. We've seen schools developing their own programs to support their teachers in the best ways of using technology for teaching and learning. And finally, we also have an online school that has been developed called the Oak National Academy, which provides pre-recorded, pre-planned lessons on Google Classroom that any pupils can access and do across all different ages, all different subjects. This goes alongside things like BBC Bite Size, which is a TV-based service. And the Oak National Academy was designed so that teachers can, as well as just telling their pupils go and do this lesson, can bring those resources into their own lesson and think about how might I use these to develop a really effective online lesson that uses my skills as a teacher, but also makes use of existing high quality resources to reduce workload. The second part of the story then is how we use technology to develop our teachers. And this probably is the area that interests me most, particularly in my role, thinking about how we can support teachers. I'm really interested in how we can use technology to support teachers in different ways. Again, this is not something that's new, unique since the pandemic. And probably it's something that for many of you around the world, actually, you've been much, much better at than we have in England. England's a relatively small country. So I guess historically, a lot of teacher training, a lot of teacher development, a lot of school leader development would still take place face to face. Prior to the pandemic, I was out at conferences probably 2 or 3 days a week speaking, traveling several hours on the train to speak at a conference for half an hour and then come home again. But that had become the norm. And I think people would like, of course, the chance to meet and to network. We as an organisation ran events as well of face-to-face prior to the pandemic alongside online events. The pandemic, of course, changed all that. And I think that whilst it's been challenging in many ways, one thing that we have seen that is positive is that actually it's opened up training and development to a far larger group of teachers who previously were not able to get out of school, or the travel was too expensive, or the time was too long. So they didn't necessarily have access to really high quality training. The move to providing training more widely online has really made a difference to that, and is something that I think will be really important going forward. That sense of equity, the sense that actually we can deliver effective training and development for teachers online, is something that I think we should really take away from this. Some examples of what we had done, because we do work all across the country and around the world, we already, before the pandemic, did offer lots of our learning materials online. I mentioned already our massive open online courses that we ran on FutureLearn. as well as our technology ones, we run 3 that look at how you can use research and carry out research. We published a publication that I'll share the link for later that looked at trends around the world in teacher CPD, and one section of that looks specifically at how digital technology is used in a range of creative ways, including classroom simulations, including using videos to do observations and provide feedback, as well as online learning, of course. And we also piloted a program which was an online teacher development program for teachers in the first year of their careers after qualifying. This was a pilot ahead of a government rollout, and it was looking specifically at how we could deliver that kind of a program online, because again, historically, these kinds of things have usually been delivered face to face, but as a new national program that the government have been rolling out, they wanted to see how something like that could be done at scale. So we tested some of that, and that was really interesting to see how we could deliver a really high quality program online. Again, since the pandemic, we have adapted what we've done with our events. We've really moved away from the face-to-face events that we used to run, and we run a larger number now of online events. And although it is challenging losing the opportunity to meet face-to-face, we found that the benefit that we have seen in terms of the number of people who are able to attend our events has really more than made up for that. And going forwards, online is definitely the direction that we will continue to go with our events. A couple of other things that I hope are particularly interesting about teacher training and initial teacher support. We very quickly at the start of the pandemic put together something that we call our early career hub, which is essentially an area of our online platform targeted specifically at trainee teachers, student teachers, and those who have just qualified. And what we wanted to do with that was really to make up for the fact that many trainee and new teachers had had their training severely disrupted because schools were closed. They weren't able to be in schools for a large period of their training. And of course, that's a time that is so important to you to understand, to become a really effective teacher, to observe other teachers. And that was taken away for the last couple of months, at least, or last 3 or 4 months of most trainees' practice. So what we put together on the Early Career Hub was a lot of videos of classroom practice, not of perfect practice by any means, just videos that we had filmed over the years in different classrooms, different age groups, different subjects, with some prompts around them to encourage people to think, oh, what's happening in the classroom here? And of course, that doesn't replace the experience of actually being in the classroom yourself, seeing something happening, but we think was really important as something, as an alternative where that wasn't possible. And that's been really popular. We've also this year been producing videos for another organization who support teacher training, because they want to create this big bank of videos to really support teachers to see different kinds of practice that they might not have time to during a busy training year. The final thing that we had to do, which again we did because it was necessary, but we believe has been a benefit, is we run 3 teacher certification programs, which essentially recognise expert teachers. Our Chartered Teacher Programme, our Chartered Teacher Leadership Programme, and a Certificate in Evidence-Informed Practice. Historically, the chartered programs in particular had a strong face-to-face element. Each phase of the program had a face-to-face day. Because of the pandemic, we had to move those to online. But actually, again, what we found is that has opened up so much the opportunities for teachers who would have loved to do this, but did not have, would not be able to attend face-to-face. To join these programs. We launched the certificate in evidence-informed practice just shortly after the pandemic started. And what we were trying to do with that was to deliver just an online program, but also to make it very small and bite-sized and modular, because we knew how busy teachers were. And we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teachers go through that program already. I think we've had 5 times the number that we had estimated and budgeted for in the last year, which is amazing, and a sign, I think, of how interested teachers are in flexible learning and online learning experiences for them. Again, many other examples that have happened around England. A number of large conference providers have moved to online approaches. Some of those are live online conferences, but also some have taken a sort of pre-recorded approach. One particular organisation, ResearchEd, used to run Saturday research conferences. In fact, they have just started running those again face to face, but they ran a whole different series that was all pre-recorded webinars shown every evening, or sometimes all on a Saturday, released in different ways, all free to allow teachers to engage. We've also seen an increase in the use of things like video mentoring, video coaching, recognizing that that's most appropriate in terms of reducing the number of people in the classroom, but also that actually it's quite a powerful way to use technology. And we've seen an increase in school collaboration in many ways, that the challenges of the pandemic meant that teachers really had to work together to produce resources. So that's something that I think is also really exciting, and I hope we see going forwards. I mentioned that I would share a link just to our teacher Cpd report, which it's a couple of years old now, but it has some great examples from around the world, and it includes a chapter on using digital technology. It's on our website, free to download, chartered.college/international-teacher-cpd-report, and hopefully we can share that in the YouTube chat as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kat, for this interesting presentation. Lots of food for thought. And thank you also for the links and points you shared. I think we shared a couple of links in the chat. You can access it later on, and we can share again the link for the report you mentioned and all the other bits. But I would like to encourage you to keep coming the questions and points you might have. Please do so. We will be able to answer all your questions in the end. And we are very excited to hear from you. I see that Kat mentioned in the beginning that she's planning to go to Argentina next year, and we do have a couple of people from Buenos Aires and other areas of Argentina here with us today. We also have some people from Mexico and from Brazil, so really good to see this is spread across Latin America. Okay, I think we will be able to go to our next guest in a minute. I just wanted to thank Kat for all the points you brought, and stressing that technology was already there before the pandemics, but the pandemics really changed the way things are and the way we perceive how things are done. But I think I would like to ask you a question, really, before we move forward, and I will have more questions towards the end, and I'm sure that colleagues in the chat will also have questions for you. But it's good to see those different programs encouraging use technology as an asset to teachers, and how they can really help ease the workload and other day-to-day bureaucracy that also needs to be done. But I was wondering if you would have any tip for those that face some sort of challenges with digital literacy, just before we go to our next speaker and we'll have more time to discuss, because I know that sometimes this comes up. There is quite a lot of things that can be done with technology, but sometimes we face some struggle in terms of digital literacy.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think there's lots of layers to it. So there is the teachers' digital literacy, but also the digital literacy of pupils, and again, we saw in the pandemic also of parents, where particularly with younger children, it might be that the children could not access the learning on their own, but if the parents were not confident with technology either, that could be a concern. I think when we look at teachers' digital literacy, there are two sides to it. Again, it's the training in how you use specific tools. So just as I demonstrated, I don't know how to make my slideshow in Keynote appear full size in this presentation mode. So knowing how to do very specific things, but there's also the work around understanding the pedagogy of how we might want to use technology. So it's seeing both that pedagogical development and the technological development, understanding precisely how to use tools. Then in terms of student digital literacy, this is really interesting because we have done a piece of research recently looking at the digital skills that teachers need, and we've looked at digital competency frameworks for teachers around the world. And one area that actually isn't covered very much is teachers understanding how to improve their students' digital skills. So there is still a bit of a gap there, actually, I think. There can be an assumption that if a teacher is good with digital tools themselves, they can then naturally support students to develop their digital skills. But I believe that this actually is a very specific skill. And again, thinking about parents and how we can make them feel confident. And of course, with all of these things, training is the big answer. But also keeping what we're trying to do as simple as possible. Sometimes we do things that are very exciting, but maybe are more challenging, and it would be better to do something simple that might allow more people to access it, rather than something that's more complicated, but only half the students will understand how to do. So I think that applies also for training teachers, keeping things simple and effective rather than really complicated.
Thank you, Kat. I think that's really useful and some food for thought for us. And I see some colleagues in the chat commenting that the key point is really about how teachers are using digital tools. Okay, but I think we can continue. We have our next speaker with us. I'm really excited to hear her speaking as well. So I would like to invite Priya Laconia to join us. Priya is the founder and CEO of CenturyTech, the award-winning artificial intelligence teaching and learning platform for schools, colleges, and universities. Priya was awarded Business Entrepreneur of the Year in 2009 and OBE in 2014. She has been a member of the Secretary of State for Business, Innovation and Skills Entrepreneurs Forum and sits on the UK government's AI Council. Priya is a thought leader in education and AI and regularly appears on BBC News to comment on current affairs. Thank you for joining us, Priya. Really good to have you here.
Thanks so much, Barbara. It's great to be here. I'm going to apologise in advance if you hear lots of announcements. I'm at Heathrow Airport and I'm due to board my plane in 30 minutes, but I could not miss meeting some of you from Brazil, Argentina and Mexico. It is really exciting to be here today. And I also want to talk to you, Barbara, and the viewers about the huge opportunity and potential that this technology presents. So, Barbara, are you happy if I dive right in? And then if I do need to leave, my colleague Will Locke, who is our Director of International and Partnerships, is ready to jump into the Q&A section. So if you're happy, I'll share my screen. It's showing me lots of tips while I share my screen. So let me just, let's get there. Let's have a look. There we go. Can you, I've now got a full screen and I can't see you. So Barbara, tell me if you can see my screen.
Yeah, just came up.
Brilliant, fantastic. So I'm going to hopefully excite you and whet your appetite about what you can do in your region in the world, and it's tried and tested elsewhere in the world. So firstly, rather than just retrofitting technology and AI, into education, that's not what we should be doing. We should take a problem-oriented approach. We should figure out what are the solutions that we need to fix in your countries across the globe in education and identify those. And I'm a big believer in approaching things in that way, because otherwise you essentially create something that nobody needs and nobody wants. So the two issues that I came across approximately 8-9 years ago, going around schools, some of the best performing schools in the country, some of the most challenged schools in the country, when every teacher, every child, every school is different, but actually we saw that schools still delivered a one-size-fits-all education. You would often sort of preach the mean. Teachers struggle with 25, 35, 45 in Rwanda, where I was recently, children in the classroom. And we really want to try and empower that student and provide a differentiated, personalised education to every individual, so no child is left behind. Why is this important? It's common sense. When we went to school, when we got stuck, it was never a nice feeling. What do students do when they get stuck? They go to the previous chapter in the textbook. And education is not that simple. It doesn't always work that way. The second problem that we have to solve, and this is, relevant in terms of empowering our educators, supercharging our teachers, making them far more effective in terms of what they do, but also solving a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. So It's a real crying shame and headline news in the UK that 80% of teachers consider quitting their jobs in the next 3 years. And this is a problem that spans the globe. The devil's in the detail. 82% of teachers that want to quit their jobs in the next 3 years say it's because they spend more than 60% of their time micro-marking, micro-assessing, trying to figure out where you intervene with every child. Every teacher wants to intervene for every child and provide that differentiated education, and they're trying to. It's really disheartening when you can't. So these are the two problems that we really want to solve: is how to empower the educators so that they can make timely, targeted interventions, and how to empower the student with a personalised and differentiated education. So looking at the problems, we have to switch to the goals. The goals are, these are very clear, so I'll whiz through them. You want to improve learning outcomes, you want efficacy in learning, you want differentiation, you want personalisation. Increasing student agency in learning is something that I continuously talk about. We want students to control their own learning journey, so that actually in the future, when the jobs of the future change, they'll be able to actually upskill and reskill themselves rather than having to be offered national training schemes, etc. So how can we get them to get that agency in learning, high quality learning resources? We know the power of formative assessment. There's lots of work that's been done by some very, very celebrated academics in this area. But the problem with formative assessment is that teacher time is valuable. Teachers handing out tests, marking tests, trying to be a data analyst and figure out where the gaps and the weaknesses are. That takes a lot of time. So how can we have formative assessment while saving teacher time? And I always include the last one, investing in our teachers. I agree with Kath, it's not as simple. Sometimes when it came to CPD includes obviously lots of things, but in digital skills, it's not simply saying, right, you now have digital skills. There is a whole host of change management and training where we need to invest in our people and in our teachers so they feel comfortable and they can then, seize the sort of digital skills revolution within education and start to take advantage of technology. So we built Century to try and solve those problems. We combined an AI with neuroscience and learning science. And I'm just going to show you a video of the platform when it was live of what it does to give you a taster of what this technology does. Before I do this, it's a slightly odd screen, so I'll go back to the last one. We went into schools several years ago. We saw schools had a learning management system, right? They all have a maths app. The problem with those apps and those systems is a learning management system is simply just digitizing what you do manually. Manually you give out homework, children get it back, you mark it, you give feedback, right? That's exactly what you do online. That's not the point of digital transformation. That's just digitization. Digital transformation, and we've seen this in every sector in the world, is about improving our processes, making more accurate decisions, making us far more efficient in what we do, and proving that efficacy. So the learning management system hasn't really transformed education. It's really what I usually look at it and say that's where innovation actually went to die. Then we look at the Maths app and the standard virtual learning environments. It's great in terms of high quality resources sometimes, but the problem is there's no differentiation. There's no personalization. Children often then disengage because they don't really know where to go when they're stuck. And actually what we know is that science is related to maths. Maths is related to literacy. So we need more than a system that's as clever as the human being who built it. So we built Century several years ago, and I'll now show you this little video. So a student, Amelia, logs in. When she logs in, it tracks every mouse movement she makes. It analyzes global mouse movements on the platform and essentially learns how you learn. That's factorizing, and it had a little icon for focus for improvement. The machine has learned that Amelia needs to focus on factorizing. This machine, by using big data analysis and tracking movements, using patterns and correlations in machine learning, using deep learning techniques, has learned that if a student is struggling with velocity in physics, it might be because they can't calculate equations in mathematics, and it gives you the maths to fix the physics. You can see there's lots of content, there's formative assessment in here, there's also summative and diagnostic assessment. But the point of the system is to offer Amelia that completely personalized pathway. So when she logs in, it's this pathway that will constantly regenerate, if you like, and learn from behaviors of people across the globe. And so that will change each time and offer Amelia something new based on how she learns. So you've got the student learning. This is where the teacher doesn't do anything. Student logs in, student learns. The platform's in Arabic, it's in Spanish, it's in English. It can host any content, any course, any curriculum. And this is about real AI. So don't be too bamboozled by AI, but it's not marketing AI. 40% of companies use the term AI as a marketing term. This is a machine that is tracking what you're doing and literally being smarter every second a student is logged in, whether they're in Singapore, in Sydney, or in Somerset. So Amelia logs in and learns. Every interaction is then tracked. You have that top tier content that's curated in-house. If we're in a different country, we curate that with our partners and we help them create really first-class, gold standard digitized content. You've got that constant assessment, you've got diagnostic assessment. And then what we also offer, as well as a personalized pathway, is global insights and deep insights to teachers. So no longer do we just tell teachers right, wrong, just a simple, that red, amber, green up there on the top left. It's really about showing the teacher what skills have been mastered. How is the cohort performing? Which children specifically need an intervention? How much time did they spend? Are they guessing? Are they hesitating? Are they skipping? Is there a particular cohort of students in your school where that demographic is actually being let down at the moment? So teachers can make in-time interventions. Senior leaders can make in-time interventions, rather than doing what we used to do, which is wait until the end of the year, until exams, until it's too late. So with Century learning so much, PP and non-PP is pupil premium and non-pupil premium. So pupil premium is children from an economically disadvantaged background. So how do they learn? What's that child understanding? After 3 months, can they understand concepts? How do dyslexic students vary? That's a huge spectrum though, isn't it? Dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism. But can the machine start to spot patterns and correlations in how certain students learn, whether they're 5 years old, 50 years old, or 95 years old? And then the whole point is making that recommended pathway, which I showed you for Amelia, even more accurate. So how do schools across the world use this? It's used in primary schools, secondary schools, further education colleges, and higher education, and now professional learning as well, because it is any content, any curriculum. You can see Eton, it's a very well-known school here in the UK. Many of our prime ministers went there. They really use this because they want to focus on that granular data, and they love the personalisation. A college, Basingstoke, they wanted to focus on their resit pass rate. So those students who are not mastering English language, they're not mastering mathematics. It's about increasing those reset pass rates. A secondary state school in Staffordshire. So we serve independent as well as state schools. We work B2C, B2B, and B2G. So Will Locke, who you'll hear from shortly, is a very busy man. But this state school here, it's about teachers spending more time on more complex skills. I'm often asked by people, why can't the AI mark long form essays? Why can't the AI do this and that? I say, look, the AI is fantastic at cementing foundation knowledge. If you want to cement that knowledge and then build skills upon it, the machine is the best in the world at doing that. But then it's time to close the machines, close the laptops, and actually focus on HI, human intelligence, the one-to-one interaction between the educator and the student. And that is what's so powerful about education. But I question all of you, why do we waste so much time of our educators when we can use technology to our benefit to enhance and augment teaching and learning? International schools, I think we onboarded about 100 schools in Pakistan within a week, and they're actually a highly using and engaged school group in Pakistan. That's all about agency, students taking agency in their learning. A school in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai wants to increase student motivation. In Panama is interesting. This school, it's about flipped learning. So if you're a school, or you're a chain of schools, or you're a government, and you want to look at different learning methodologies such as flipped learning, how can you use technology to help to augment that? So students learn at home before the main lesson, and then you go into the main lesson, let's say a week later, and focus on interventions. It's a tried and tested successful methodology used in teaching and learning. What do we see in terms of impact? That's the big question we're often asked, because this technology is the benefit of having been around now for several years. AI requires big data and AI requires years and years of development. Any startup with AI, you question, is it real artificial intelligence? Well, independent studies, maths users saw their grade improve 10x across the national, above the national average. Schools did their own randomized controlled trials and their own studies. They saw increases in science grades above predicted grades for the cohort of students that spent time on the system. adult learners improve their scores by an average of 22%. This is not just about children, it's education and lifelong learning as well. And when we did a study that we did with Educate in UCL, we saw on average a 30% improvement in outcomes. So what does this mean if you're a country? Well, in a country or in a state, we can also split that data by region. You can start to see how students are performing relatively according to the region in real time. You can start to see how a country is performing. If you're a chain of schools, you can start to see how different schools are performing. What does that allow you to do? Well, in real time, you can say we need more science resources here. You know, there's a particular subject in secondary that's working really well in mathematics. Let's take some of those teachers and let them, you know, train others in terms of continuing professional development, because actually there are some schools over here where we're lacking the same sort of expertise and our performance is not the same. You can cut the data any which way you want. So we've got dashboards we built for countries. You can understand progress, performance, attainment, engagement. You can start to predict how students are going to perform, engagement and dropout as well in higher education. So you can actually make interventions, in fact, before time. And that's where predictions are really powerful. We have a very ethical standpoint in terms of you shouldn't offer such predictions to students from machines. You need that human teacher and that sort of engagement with the student and that teacher subjective view as well. But it does provide very robust data points in terms of how students are performing. So you can make those really important interventions. And then the list goes on, really. There's a lot of data being collected. What questions would you like to answer with it? In terms of how AI, and I'll finish on this very briefly, has been transforming the world. Well, pre-COVID, for example, with Century, we served schools in these countries where the red pins are. And actually, COVID accelerated EdTech adoption, as we all know. We were in the world's largest EdTech experiment over the last 18 months. But what happened with AI? People, even the skeptics, if you look at Roger's adoption curve of technology, there are, you know, the early innovators and the pioneers, right? They took the technology on pre-2020, maybe from, you know, 2016 to 2020. But in 2020, you saw some of the early majority, the late majority, actually grab hold of it. They needed it in the last year during lockdown. And now what you see is schools across the world are embracing Century's AI technology, and it's having a real impact, and that's coming in phases. So the more of those yellow pins and orange pins that turn red, they've been using it for a year or 2 years. You'll see that teachers talk to teachers trust teachers, they'll tell their friends, and essentially you'll see that kind of organic growth. So I'll stop there after a very quick sort of slide share. I need to stop my screen. There we go. But I'm very, very happy they haven't called my flight yet if you'd like to ask me any questions. But if you can bring Will Locke into the conversation, I'd be very happy for him to join as well, so that if I do need to log off, then he can continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Priya, for this engaged presentation and for this overview. Very exciting. I think we have a couple of questions already on the chat, but I will invite Will Locke to join us on stage. Sure. Just to introduce Will. So Will is the Director of Partnerships at Untitled, and he works with companies across the world to adopt and launch Century's teaching and learning platform and resource to make meaningful impact in each local context. And Will also has over 15 years of experience building, growing, and operating international EdTech and media business. Thank you for joining us, Will. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Very good to see the two things joining up together. So at first we had this overview from Kat on how technology can actually help with the burden, and then we learned more from Priya on using AI and this personalized learning. So I think there's a couple of questions here already. I will put it out for you guys. There are some specific questions about Century. I will just ask while Priya is still here, and then we can move to other questions. So there's a question here about the age range that the platform is aimed at. If you could, please.
Yeah, sure. So that's a really good question. So our platform is used for children from the age of around 6 all the way up to, you know, we've had a 90-year-old redo their English O-level, now the GCSE, and pass it to college. So that's the general age range. There are some parents and some teachers that will put children as young as 5 on. I think what you've got to be conscious of is it's perfect sort of, if you look at the British curriculum, for example, you know, Key Stage 2 onwards tool, you can use this technology, obviously, with younger children to start to get to know things like, I mean, on our platform in English, they've got English, you know, sorry, addition, they've got subtraction, very, very basic sort of English videos and slides on the English language, and that's wonderful. Just all you've got to be careful of is the younger the age you go, and because Century is a social impact company, we like to warn people about this. Every time a child is tapping and scrolling at a young age, what they're not doing is actually exercising those fine motor skills like holding the pencil and playing with toys that help them learn. There is a direct correlation between students at a very young age who do not have strong fine motor skills and their cognition later in life. So what we mustn't do as technology companies and suppliers is try too far to encourage people to use these technologies, including AI, which is so powerful in so many ways, but at too young an age for too often. I think for maybe 20 minutes a week, it's fine. But, you know, don't replace what those children are doing for using these sorts of technology. So that's why at Century, we recommend sort of 6 and above, because by that point, children generally have the ability, they're holding pencils, they're writing, they have fine motor skills, they can pick up cereal if it drops off the floor, all these little techniques that some of us use. But that's generally the age range. It is fantastic for a knowledge-based curriculum, specifically to create that foundation at an early, you know, from the age of 6, let's say, and then all the way through secondary, and then in higher education, corporate education, and vocational studies as well. So all that knowledge we need people to retain and be able to recall, to then apply skills upon and analyze, you know, problems using concepts. This technology is fantastic for. Then, and I'm extending beyond the age range kind of question a little bit because it's very important, but things like critical thinking, deduction and inference, you know, these are skills you can test, but not as extensively. Creative writing, these are things where you will have more time as an educator to enhance and develop those skills with children if you're using a machine like this. Thanks, Barbara. And thanks for the questions they caused you, Nicole.
Thank you, Priya. Okay, I think I will ask the next one for all of you, and this is a very good question. So colleagues were asking if you could explore the importance of technology and AI in the Latin American reality. Would you mind starting, Kat?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the people who have joined this webinar probably have more expertise and ideas on this than I do. So I think I would like to throw that back. Actually, I would love to hear from people in the comments on the stream to hear actually what are your experiences of using technology and AI most powerfully. I think one reflection that I have, given the kind of global nature of this conversation, of course, you're thinking about Latin America and the Caribbean, and we're here from England, is the extent to which technology enables this kind of collaboration, both for educators, but also for pupils in different ways. And I think that's a really exciting potential use for technology. But yes, I would love to hear examples from anybody attending of things that they think are really powerful.
Barbara, if I may, because I'm going to jump off, and I'll let Will tell you what about Mexico, because I saw some really interesting questions about Latin America and why there are no pins on the map yet. And we have some exciting news actually about Mexico. But you know, the world's a big place, and what I would say as the founder of Century is this technology we really need to get into. We need to access all children. All children need to be able to access this, to have that differentiated, personalized learning. So the big question in Latin America is not, it's sort of a if Latin America takes on and adopts this sort of technology, it's a when. And the when question is simply answered with that Rogers adoption curve of innovators and pioneers. Who in the audience here is the innovator and the pioneer? Because we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to onboard the technology. We'd love to figure out a way to bring it into Latin America. It's something we're very passionate about. We've just been spreading ourselves throughout the globe. And I suppose this is exactly why Barbara's invited us here. But I'll hand over to Will to talk a bit about Mexico. And all I can say is I'm so sorry I have to drop off to get this plane, but thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Priya. And Barbara, if you allow me, I can just say a few more words about our presence in Latin America so far. So as Priya says, we are now in Spanish and in particular growing out our Spanish presence in Mexico to start off with. and are interested to explore opportunities in other Spanish-speaking markets across Latin America. And then our English language product is used in international schools, English speaking international schools across Latin America already. So we have schools in Brazil, British international schools in Brazil, who are using the Sentry platform very effectively and getting a huge amount of value out of it, as well as obviously in Mexico and Panama and a few other countries in Central America, which may not have appeared on the map, but hopefully there's some presence there. But as Priya says, we are looking to bring the value and the impact of Sentry across the whole territory, and are looking for partners and innovators who would like to do that with us.
Thank you, Will. And please feel free to share in the chat your experiences and comments on that. I think many colleagues here from across the region might have interesting experience to share. I think we have time for one more question before I give you space for your final remarks. I think I would like to ask you, so we spoke a lot about technology, AI, and all the implications of them. And something that we've been hearing a lot recently is about tackling learning losses. So I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on how technology and teachers have a role to play in that, and how they could really help tackling those losses from the pandemics in the past few year and a half.
Yes, Kat, do you want to go first, or shall I lead off? I can lead off. Yeah, absolutely. So as Priya was saying, obviously over the last 18 months, it's been a completely unexpected and unusual period. And for educators across the world, they have to very quickly revert to different forms of learning. And what that has resulted in, sadly, in many places, is big amounts of lost learning and big gaps in knowledge, and students being behind where they may otherwise have been. And technology such as ours really allows teachers, students, parents to understand very quickly where they are and how they're getting on in comparison to what their requirements are and what the objectives are for their particular curriculum. And so we have found over the last 18 months that a lot of our customers and new customers have been turning to us to get that insight, and to then use in the classroom the analytics and insight that big data can bring. It can understand where certain gaps in knowledge are, where weaknesses are that need to be filled, and recommend very quickly to the teachers and to the educators to intervene at the right time. So we have found that the use of technology has increased rapidly over the last 18 months, and that the power of that technology is really being understood and harnessed by educators all over the world. And we think that that's going to carry on, and the technology will continue to have an increasing role in the classroom. But of course, it can't replace. It is certainly not replacing the teachers and the learners in the classroom. The teachers must remain the most important people in the classroom. But we do everything we can to support them, to help them with data, to make their use of our platform and technology as seamless as possible.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think there's probably two things I would highlight. One is potentially how technology might support home learning and homework to be more effective. The research broadly suggests that a lot of homework is not very effective in supporting learning. It adds work for teachers, but actually doesn't necessarily help pupils to learn better. If we can use technology tools where that's appropriate, and where schools have access to devices to help them to learn better and to use their home learning time better, that helps with the learning loss and the catch up that we might want to see. But actually, I think Christina's point in the chat, in the comments, is probably the most important. That actually we know from research and from neuroscience, but also just from our experiences during the pandemic, how much is lost when you don't have the face-to-face time with your teachers. And what we need to focus on, and what we have learned a bit during the pandemic, is what are the activities that technology can do well that saves time, that means that teachers are not fulfilling bureaucratic activities, that the teachers maybe are not constantly marking things that could have been done automatically, and are able to spend their time most effectively when they are face to face with children. So I absolutely agree with Christina's point there.
Yeah, absolutely. And technology at its best is freeing up teachers to do what they do best, which is teach and spend time with their students and intervene at the right time. Completely agree.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kat and Will. I think we have reached the time we had available for this session today. I will just give the word back to Kat and Will if you want to make any final comments before I wrap up. Over to you, Kat.
Just to say thank you so much for joining, for sharing your thoughts and experiences. I do hope to get to Latin America next year to have some holiday, but also to learn a bit more about the education system there. And always happy to hear from anyone who wants to collaborate around developing teachers.
Fantastic, thank you. And yeah, just to say thank you very much for your time today. And please do get in touch if you have any questions. We're at century.tech. And if you want to send an email, it's just info@century.tech. And we'd love to hear from you with any questions about what we're up to, but also if you'd like to have a demonstration of the platform and learn more. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Kat, Will, and Priya. I believe she has gone to take her flight. And thank you to all of you that have been with us this morning for this 1 hour session. I hope it was useful and some interesting comments that can help you with some very important and big questions, I would say, that we need to face in the next few months and few years. So this is our first activity for the UK and LATAC partners in education. Please stay tuned in our social media, the UK in Brazil, YouTube, LinkedIn and Instagram page, but you can also follow the UK Embassy in Argentina, Mexico, and all over Latin America to find more information on what the UK has been up to in education and some interesting cases. And this recording will be saved. You can access it later on as well. Thank you for keeping up with us. Please get in touch if you have any questions or if you want any more information. Hope you have a very good day. Thank you for staying with us. Bye-bye.